This video is going to continue your introduction to the indirect statement in Latin. You will recall from last time that one of our examples was Milites vident scaevolam manum in ignem ponere. And we translated this example as the soldiers see that Scaevola puts his hand into the fire. We have the three main characteristics of the indirect statement. We have the head verb, a verb of perception, vident, they see. We have our accusative subject of the indirect statement, scaevolam. And we have an infinitive. This one is a present active infinitive, ponere. Now, remember that the indirect statement is a construction in Latin that expresses an action or an idea through a specific person's point of view. So, in our other example from last time, milites credunt scaevolam fortem esse, the soldiers believe that Scaevola is brave. We understand that Scaevola is brave through the point of view of the soldiers and how they believe that Scaevola is brave. In our translations in English, we want to use the word that to help us introduce the indirect statement. And again, the three main elements of an indirect statement in Latin are the head verb, a verb of thinking, saying, knowing, or perceiving, an accusative subject, and an infinitive verb. So in our example below, milites credunt scaevolam fortem esse, credunt is the head verb, scaevolam is the accusative subject, and esse is the infinitive verb. In this video, we will be exploring in more detail the uses of the infinitive in each of its three different tenses, the present, the perfect, and the future. So remember that the tense of the infinitive indicates the time relationship of the indirect statement to the head verb of the main sentence. So the present tense infinitive denotes an action of the indirect statement that goes on at the same time as the main verb. A perfect tense infinitive denotes an action in the indirect statement that happens earlier than the main verb of the sentence. And the future tense infinitive indicates an action of the indirect statement that occurs later than the main verb of the sentence. So, in our example, milites credunt scaevolam fortem esse, esse is a present tense infinitive, and so the soldiers believe that Scaevola is being brave at that very moment. To explore the concept of this time relationship, I think it's best for us to look at a handful of examples. You'll find these on your handout, so be sure to follow along. Our first one is Scaevola dicit se manum incendisse. So in this sentence, dicit is our main verb and incendisse is our infinitive. Dicit is a present tense indicative, and incendisse is a perfect tense infinitive. Now remember that the perfect infinitive denotes an action earlier than the main verb. So the action of our indirect statement, se manum incendisse, happens earlier than the main verb, dicit. Before we translate this, I will also remind you that se is a third-person reflexive pronoun. It refers back to the subject of the sentence. The subject of our sentence is Scaevola, and so he will be the referent of se. So we translate this as, Scaevola says, present tense, that he burned his hand. Notice that the action of the burning happens earlier than the action of the main verb, the verb of saying. So let's play with that tense of the infinitive, incendisse. Here we have Scaevola dicit se manum incendere. So dicit is our main verb, and incendere is our infinitive. Dicit is a present tense indicative verb, and incendere is our present tense infinitive. And so recall that the present infinitive denotes an action of the indirect statement that goes on at the same time as the main verb. So here we'll translate this as, Scaevola says that he is burning his hand. The action of the burning, using a present tense infinitive, goes on at the same time as the action of saying. And here's another example. Scaevola dicit se manum incensurum esse. So dicit again is our main verb, and incensurem esse is our infinitive. Dicit is still a present indicative verb, and incensurem esse is a future tense infinitive. Now, remember that the future tense of the infinitive indicates an action of the indirect statement that is later than the action of the main verb. So we translate this as, Scaevola says that he will burn his hand. Now, notice also that incensurem is a masculine accusative singular. Incensurem is just a participle from the verb incendo, and so as a participle, and like an adjective, it can have all three of the following: case, number, and gender. The case, number, and gender of this infinitive match the case, number, and gender of our accusative subject, say. And we can tell that say is singular and masculine because it refers back to Scaevola, who is also masculine and singular. Now let's look at some examples where our head verb is in the past tense. Scaevola dixit se manum incendisse. So our main verb is dixit, and the infinitive is incendisse. Dixit is a perfect tense indicative, and incendisse is a perfect tense infinitive. Recall again that the perfect tense infinitive denotes an action that goes on earlier than the action of the main verb. And so we translate this as, Scaevola said, past tense, that he had burned his hand. This sounds like a pluperfect tense translation. He had burned. It has to be more perfect, farther back in the past, than the perfect tense main verb. Scaevola said that he had burned his hand. Okay, here's the next one. Scaevola dixit se manum incendere. Here, the main verb is dixit, and the infinitive is incendere. Dixit, again, is a perfect tense indicative, and incendere is a present tense infinitive. And remember that the present tense infinitive indicates an action going on at the same time as the main verb. So we translate this as, Scaevola said, past tense again, that he was burning his hand. At the time that Scaevola was speaking, at the very same time, he was burning his hand. And one more. Scaevola dixit se manum incensurum esse. So dixit is our main verb, and incensurum esse is our infinitive. Dixit is, again, a perfect tense indicative, and incensurum esse is a future tense infinitive. The future tense infinitive, remember, indicates an action that goes on in the indirect statement that is later than the action of the main verb. So we will translate this as, Scaevola said, past tense, that he would burn his hand. The action of the burning hasn't happened by the time that Scaevola speaks. So we said, he would burn his hand. Notice again that the form of incensurum is a masculine, singular, accusative to match the form of se, which is also masculine, singular, and accusative. Now we have two examples from Latin literature. The first one comes from the beginning of Livy's Ab Urbe Condita. Livy tells us an alternative version of a story in which Latinus, an early Italian king, was fighting against Aeneas, who recently arrived in Italy. Livy says, Alai proelio victum esse Latinum, pacem cum Aenea, dende affinitatem junxisse tradunt. Here, our head verb is at the very end of the sentence, tradunt. They tell a story. Our subject is alai, all the way at the beginning of the sentence. We have two infinitives, both in the perfect tense. Victum esse, a perfect passive infinitive, and junxisse, a perfect active infinitive. And Latinus is our accusative subject of the indirect statement. So, some tell a story that Latinus, victum esse, was conquered, proelio, in battle. Notice how the action of the perfect tense infinitive goes on before the action of the handing down, the telling of the story. Then we take the next infinitive, junxisse. Literally, that Latinus joined a peace with Aeneas, or more idiomatically, made peace with Aeneas. Dende affinitatem, then he made a family alliance. Again, the action of Jungsusse, the making of peace and the making of a family alliance, occurs before the action of the telling of the story. And here's a sentence that uses the future tense of the infinitives. Legati haec se ad suos relaturos esse, dixerunt, et re deliberata post diem tertium ad Caesarem reversuros esse. Here, our main verb is towards the beginning of the sentence, dixerunt, and legati is the subject of this sentence. The envoys, or the legates, said. Se is the accusative subject of the indirect statement, and it refers back to the subject of the main sentence, legati. So the envoys said that they would report these things, accusative direct object, to their own people. Notice how the action of the indirect statement, with a future tense infinitive, the action of the reporting, happens later than the action of the main verb, the saying. And re deliberata, there's an ablative absolute, with the matter having been discussed. Post diem tertium, prepositional phrase, after the third day, ad Caesarem, another prepositional phrase, to Caesar, they would return. Reversuros esse, another future tense infinitive that goes on later than the time of the main verb, dixerunt. As Caesar is fighting his wars in Gaul, he works closely with envoys or legates from various tribes around Gaul, and these legates serve as go-betweens between their tribe and Caesar. The envoys said that they would report these things to their people, and that, with the matter having been discussed among their people, they would return to Caesar after the third day.